also age-wise. Joffrey 15. Myrcella 13. Tommen 10. 298 AC. Underscore 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 underscore. Joffrey's POV. It was a shame to wake from such a sweet dream only to find death and misery. His mother's vibrant green eyes were the first thing he was aware of upon waking. Her face knitted into a somber smile as she gazed at her firstborn with sympathy. Joffrey noticed the mourning colors she wore, black with flavors of red and yellow, instead of her traditional crimson gowns. He was out the door before she finished speaking, half-dressed and half-awake. For his father could not be dead, Robert Baratheon slayed a dragon, and how could a boar kill a legend? Outside his father's solar he steadied his breathing. His queen mother and faithful bodyguard Sandor Clegane a step behind him. The hallway smelled of rotten shit, blinking away tears. Joffrey stepped in the room. Barristan Selmy stood his guard by the door, grief-stricken face and standing tall and still like a statue. His white armor was crimson-stained from the king he failed to protect. Where was he? It's his job to protect father. Sandor never failed me. Why did he fail father? His siblings were in the corner of the room with his uncle Jaime, his young brother, crying like a newborn. His fat and tiny body shaking with raspy breaths as he gripped his older sister in a tight grip. The young Myrcella looked like her mother made small, with silent tears running down her face. She absent-mindedly patted little Tommen on the back. She was brave, he noticed, but not brave enough. There were no tears running down his face as he approached his father. He was a prince, soon to be king. As strong as a Baratheon, as proud as a Lannister. Simpletons and beggars would undoubtedly call him heartless, but he needed to be strong for his people. For his mother who had lost the love of her life, and his sweet sister Myrcella, who was looking ever so beautiful even with tears running down her face. Pycelle spoke to him, and gave the details that his mother had not. A hunting accident is what they said, it looked more like a murder. The sheets were heavy with blood, the scent of decay and death filled the room until he felt as if he couldn't breathe. Robert's hunting trophies looked down at the king, seemingly laughing at the fallen man who killed them. Jon Arryn was at the king's side, tears dotted the eyes of the old man. He had few fond memories of Jon Arryn, and in this moment, Joffrey only saw a weak decrepit who was crying over a far better man. It should have been him. What did he have to cry about? Was he that worried about his job? He should be. Grandfather would never have let this happen. He should be grateful I don't take his head for compence. Joffrey tried to suppress his anger, and instead tried to find his voice. Father, he spoke, his voice sounding more like the boy he was, rather than the man he craved to be. Jon Arryn looks over to him with kindly blue eyes, a sad smile on his thin wiry lips. Robert's blue eyes met Joffrey's own, they carried a strength and resolve that Joffrey knew he would never be able to match. Eventually the king spoke, his voice grated like screeching metal. It sounded weak, but commanding. Leave us. It was a simple statement. For a moment, Joffrey waited for Jon Arryn to leave the room. Then the reality of the situation hit him. He's talking to me. Stunned, Joffrey turned and walked away before anything else could be said. His mother followed him dutifully out of the room. She whispered soothing words into his ear as they walked away. How brave of father, refusing to let me see him in his weakened state. Underscore 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 underscore. Joffrey's coronation was planned the same day by his mother, eager as ever at the chance of power. She spoke in an excited tone to his uncle Jaime behind his back, and a soothing whisper to him when he made his presence known. His father was dead, and he supposed the realm would have to move on. It seemed too soon still. He avoided his siblings, his parents, and with Sandor by his side he found his way to the Iron Throne. The throne room was empty. He dismissed the few guards that normally stayed in this area so he could be alone. He took a tentative step up to the throne his father made his own. I've heard that the barbs on the throne would cut those unworthy to be king. As he stared at the throne from atop the stairs, his mind wandered to the last time he saw his father. A few nights prior, when he departed for his hunt, promising to bring back a boar to feast on. Now that same boar gutted him. Joffrey quickly sat down on the throne. Sandor moved behind the throne as he did, standing as his honored guard. Tears welled in Joffrey's eye, and then they fell freely down his face. He could show weakness here, no one would see him, no one would ever know except Sandor, and he could trust Sandor with anything. He looked down at his hands uncut from the throne despite his biggest fears. He was worthy, he could do this, he would be a king for the ages, and the songs they would sing of his reign would bring maidens across the realm to tears. I will make you proud, father. Underscore 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 underscore. There was to be a feast, the largest seen in a generation by all accounts, and of course a tourney fit for a king. It would mark the dawning of a new age, one that was marked by his coronation. The great lords of the Seven Kingdoms would come. From the Wall to the Sands of Dawn, within a moon's turn everyone worth mentioning in the Seven Kingdoms would be in King's Landing. Mummers and singers from free cities, a few dancing fools, and of course a great joust to commemorate the new king. His mother and regent maid did all the planning, carefully working out the details with her own father. Within a moon's turn, the events were ready to begin. The tourney ended as it should, with his uncle Jaime crowning his mother the Queen of Love and Beauty. When Jaime placed the crown of roses atop her head, she smiled as brightly as the sun. All in attendance began clapping, except Mace Tyrell, who loudly complained about the coin he lost betting on his son. Like a pillow bitter could beat Uncle Jaime. There was some surprise in the grand melee. Robb Stark, the future lord of the northern savages that came to pay him respect, won after besting those left standing. It was no real surprise in a way, all of the good fighters had already participated in the joust. Joffrey hesitated before giving Robb Stark the victor's purse of 10,000 gold dragons. The archery contest was won by a squid named Theon Greyjoy, who proceeded to dedicate his win to his homeland, and Margaery Tyrell, who looked more annoyed than amused. Joffrey was even less amused than her. The idea of giving a Greyjoy any kind of award made him physically ill. However, Joffrey gave him the 5,000 gold dragons through gritted teeth. Joffrey's new crown was a heavy golden band, decorated with 7 large diamonds to represent the 7 kingdoms. In the center of the crown, there was a large red stone, that was to symbolize his heritage. He was crowned in throne room in front of all the important lords of the realms. Except the Greyjoys and Martells, so I suppose anyone important is here then. Jon Arryn came first, and swore his undying loyalty to any son of Robert Baratheon. He said so sincerely, but he didn't understand the emphasis Jon Arryn placed on his father's name. It was strange and unnecessary. When Joffrey questioned his wording, Lord Arryn simply smiled and glanced at his mother, who paled considerably. Edmure Tully gave his oath for his father, and explained that due to his father's failing health, that he was currently the active Lord of the Trident. He gave his oath awkwardly, and rushed from the room quickly, obviously uncomfortable. Renly came right after, and gave his oath with his customary smile. He promised to serve the realm to the best of his ability. Similar to Jon Arryn, he placed a special emphasis on the realm, but walked out before Joffrey could question him. Tywin Lannister gave no oath, but his mother and uncle assured him that he was loyal to the crown. Theon Greyjoy and Oberyn Martell came next, giving the oaths for their family members who could not or would not attend. Both of them gave their oaths with some form of visible resignation. Oberyn Martell brought his bastard daughters with him, and his mistress. A slight if there ever was one, and Joffrey entertained the idea of taking all of their heads. I can be merciful once, especially on the day of my coronation. Mace Tyrell, the fool, thought this would be an excellent time to introduce him to his daughter. The girl was pretty enough. She was a woman that most men would dream of, but he wasn't most men. He already had a girl in mind that was perfect for him. Besides, the Tyrell girl was beneath his station. He needed to find a girl that would suit his tastes and his rank. She also seemed a bit uncomfortable in his presence, not that he cared. She looks like a deer anyway, Joffrey sneered when the girl looked anywhere but him. It was unfortunate to learn the girl he saw at the beginning of the coronation, a great beauty with hair of spun copper, was also a Stark. He would be the laughing stock of the realm by marrying a savage. His father would assuredly be ashamed of him if he did. A Baratheon marrying a Stark, that would be like a whore marrying a Lannister. Though the girl's father was decent enough, and also seemed to be one of the few people legitimately distraught by his own father's death. Perhaps the man would do well on the small council. Your Grace, if you ever need help, do not hesitate to ask. Your father was a brother to me, and I would do whatever in my power for his son. The Stark Lord said, his grey eyes shone in the low torchlight. The Valyrian steel sword he leaned on to renew his oaths also glimmered in a fascinating way. Of all the lords to so far present themselves, Eddard Stark was the only one to openly bend the knee. He looked over to his left to see his uncle Jaime amused, and his mother smiling. He knew Jaime hated Eddard Stark, and that Cersei could not care for the man either. However, his uncle Tywin had a small amount of respect for the man, despite the fact the realm considered the two of them rivals. Joffrey's own father loved Ned Stark as a brother. It was said that Eddard Stark defeated Sir Arthur Dayne in combat, that he was the deadliest general from Robert's rebellion, and that he was a true demon on the battlefield. Joffrey was sure the talks were exaggerated, but if even half the rumors were true, Joffrey could find a use for him. He would be an excellent servant. Your loyalty is the only boon I request from you, my lord. Now please, stand up. I know of your loyalty already. There was no need to show it, Joffrey said. He had to resist the urge to roll his eyes as the words left his mouth. The Stark Lord ate it up, however. I wonder if all Northerners are this gullible. Perhaps I could convince that Stark girl to warm my bed on cold winter nights. If father has shown me anything, it's that you need not marry a woman to fuck her. Underscore 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 underscore. The small council of his father had to go. Jon Arryn was obviously too old to fulfill his duties any longer. Tywin Lannister would make a fine replacement. Besides, Jon Arryn was the one who put the crown in debt in the first place. According to Petyr Baelish, it was Jon who pressured Robert to spend so much money on feast and tourneys to appeal to the small folk. That fool nearly ruined us. I could never allow him to continue in his position. Renly and Stannis are even worse. Renly is a pillow bitter. He's a laughing stock in court. I can't allow him to taint my image. Stannis is just annoying. He's actually exceptionally good at his job. He just so happens to be the most boring man I have ever met in my life. They were of course, angered by his dismissal. Stannis was especially furious when he informed him that Dragonstone would be going to Joffrey's firstborn son when the time came. Not that he showed it, all Stannis did was grind his teeth a little harder, and march from the room. It was hardly Joffrey's fault anyway, it was Robert's for not having a proper place for Stannis. Joffrey needed to assemble a new small council, a better small council. In the normal chambers for the said council, he had assembled 3 Lord Paramounts. These 3 individuals made up the majority of the realm's power, and together they could make or break any king. Mace Tyrell Joffrey began intentionally forgetting the man's title. The bubbling oaf puffed himself up as Joffrey called his name, and the king had to resist the urge to roll his eyes. Mace's daughter stood beside him along with his 2 youngest sons. I am in need of a master of ships, and it has come to my attention that an able man such as yourself would do well on the small council. It would be my honor to serve the realm, your grace, Mace bolstered proudly. Any Tyrell will happily serve the crown, isn't that right? Marjorie Mace patted his daughter on the back, who looked genuinely annoyed. However, the girl put on a smile and curtsied. A pleasure to make your acquaintance, your grace. A man willing to sell his daughter like a whore for a bit of power. How pathetic. But he'll be easy to manipulate. The pleasure is all mine, Margaery, Joffrey said, already growing bored of Mace Tyrell. The girl had her eyes elsewhere anyway, he could do better. It was time to move down the line. Lord Eddard Stark, my father has always said you were the most honorable man he knew. He considered you a brother and a friend. The dour Eddard Stark looked at him with impassive grey eyes. Behind him, his son and heir stood just as confidently. Though the boy continually looked back at Margaery Tyrell when he thought no one was looking. Do me the honor of serving on my small council as Master of Laws. It would be an honor to serve my grace. Ned Stark bowed his head, his son quickly doing the same. Though I'm afraid that with winter approaching, I should be in the north to watch over my people. Mace Tyrell looked amazed at Eddard Stark's statement, and immediately seized on the opportunity. If Lord Stark is unable to serve, my oldest son Williers would make an excellent Master of Laws. He's always going about the laws and books and other such nonsense, isn't that right, Marjorie? That time Joffrey did roll his eyes, not that Mace noticed. Before the girl could speak, Joffrey decided to intervene. I insist, Lord Stark, your help would be invaluable to the realm, and I would be happy to accommodate you and your family's needs here in King's Landing. Ned Stark was silent for a moment. If you insist, your grace, I will serve here as your Master of Laws. Good, Joffrey stated with a smirk. He turned to his grandfather, a man who was already wearing the badge of his new office. Grandfather, I would like you to be my new hand. Joffrey stated, just as his mother had instructed him to. Tywin almost smiled, and that alone filled Joffrey with a hint of fear. Of course, your grace. I will take the position you have so graciously offered. Wine was called, and every occupant in the room took a cup. The Tyrell girl moved closer to the Stark heir and smiled, turning the boy Lannister red. They raised their cups in unison, toasting for the future to come. Finally he could begin turning the realm around. A new age of prosperity was beginning. 299 AC. Joffrey walked from the throne room, Sir Trant and Sir Moore following closely behind. A scowl was locked onto Joffrey's face as he remembered what his grandfather had told him earlier that day. Joffrey knew as a recently crowned king, he would have little time as a bachelor, but he believed he would have more time than a scant week since his coronation. Already, his grandfather had been crafting deals and alliances behind his back. Betrothing Joffrey to the flower of Highgarden Margaery Tyrell. The girl was a great beauty, but Joffrey found her rather annoying and downright insufferable at times. The way she looked at the Stark heir was also grating. A woman with such low standards would not be fit for a king. Then there was Tommen's arranged marriage to some Dornish whore, who was far too old for him. Even worse, Myrcella was to be shipped off to the cold north, the bride of Robb Stark, an arrogant bastard if Joffrey ever met one. Joffrey had no desire to lose his siblings to those who didn't deserve them. Tommen was a brat, but he deserved better than a disease-ridden whore from Dorne. Mayhaps just a normal whore, that way he takes after Uncle Tyrion, Joffrey thought bitterly. Far worse to Joffrey was the loss of Myrcella, his only sister. At only 3 and 10 she deserved more than a northern savage for a husband. He remembered when Myrcella and Robb Stark danced at his coronation. Joffrey's sister was always flushed with fear. Then afterwards he would find the two together, Robb Stark following her like an animal in heat and Joffrey's sweet sister pretending to laugh at his jests. Joffrey knew marriage was much more than an exchange of vows, for Joffrey knew a marriage between a king and a noble lady was much more than a proclamation of love. It was the foundation for an alliance that could assure stability across the realm. It was such a marriage that brought Joffrey's father and mother together. It allowed for his birth, and even now the lion and stag banners draped across the Red Keep were signs of its success. Tywin had said that another such marriage was needed to keep the Seven Kingdoms united, but Joffrey had to disagree. Even a blind man could see that Tywin was living in the past, when dangerous men once played the Game of Thrones. Now there was nothing but tired old men. They needed no alliance with the Reach, especially with a fool like Mace Tyrell running things. They would never turn against the crown, and if they did, Joffrey would crush them under his heel. Nor did they need an alliance with Dorne. The land of wine, whores, and poverty. They were barely worth mentioning. Besides, their loyalty wasn't worth a copper, let alone a prince, even if that prince was Tommen. Then there was the North. Why would they ever need a northern alliance? Eddard Stark was loyal as a dog, more a mutt than a wolf in Joffrey's opinion. He would never turn against his master. Joffrey continued his walk through the Red Keep, his loyal knights close behind. He was happy to be free of Barristan. Sandor was a better fit for the Kingsguard. He walked aimlessly, passing his mother and Uncle Jaime on the way, sitting in the garden talking quietly, a bottle of Dornish red between them. Mace Tyrell, joyfully laughing with his sons and daughter. The family seemed to be having a picnic of some sort, one he was not invited to, he noted bitterly. Lord Eddard Stark, talking with his grandfather as they walked through the halls towards the Tower of the Hand. Talk of some marriage pact between bastards. A grim expression on the Lord of the North's face. Robb Stark followed his father a step behind, and Myrcella was a step behind him. Petyr Baelish walked to him, a swagger to his step. As normal, the Vale Lord smelled of mint, and soft smile on his face. Your Grace, he bowed low to his king. Baelish Joffrey responded with disgust. He never liked the man, far too slimy for his taste. Not for the first time, Joffrey wondered about replacing him with his great-uncle Kevan. What do you need? What I need. Your Grace, the only thing I require is to serve the Seven Kingdoms. Petyr smiled, rimming Joffrey of a toothless snake. I heard a rumor that you were distressed about something. I believe I can help. Do tell me, Baelish, even if I did require help, how could someone of your stature possibly assist me? Joffrey asked with a sneer, ready to abandon this conversation. I simply wish to remind you, that you're the king. Oh. That's all, and why did you waste my time stating the obvious? Simple enough question, it is because I understand the burden you face being a young king. But just remember, you are the king, the realm is yours. If there is anything you want, you simply have to take it for your own. Baelish smiled, and bowed before departing, a skip in his step as he made his way down the hall, no doubt to spy on Sansa Stark. Baelish had made a valid point, he was king, he could take anything he desire for his own, and his vassals would simply have to understand. Or anyone. Underscore 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 underscore. Myrcella was stunning in her white gown. She was as pure as the maiden herself, with hair like woven gold. Her heart-shaped face and captivating green eyes had been haunting his dreams since she came of age. Now she was his, and only his. He felt proud of himself. He stopped his sister from marrying a mutt, and saved himself from marrying a rose. Myrcella would not have to spread her legs for a Stark, and he would not be married to girl beneath his station, a true victory if there ever was one. The common people were disgusted by brother marrying sister. The lords of the realm were furious for being overlooked. The Tyrells had seemingly disappeared from King's Landing overnight. When the announcement was made, Lord Tyrell barely stopped by to resign from his post. Mace Tyrell was shaking with fury when resigned. The Lord Oaf of Highgarden looked as angry as any man has ever seen him, his fat face twisted into righteous anger. It was downright comical to watch, in all honesty. The Warden of the South asked Joffrey why he broke the betrothal that he and Tywin had so painstakingly worked out. So Joffrey decided to tell him the truth. That his daughter was a wanton slut more suited to lay with dogs than share a bed with a king, and that no marriage would go through as long as Joffrey had the fear of catching something. Mace did not take kindly to Joffrey's words, and every man loyal to the Reach was out of King's Landing by nightfall. Tywin had said little about the match, but he made his opinion heard regardless. Both his mother and uncles came to him and pleaded with him to apologize with the Tyrells, and give Myrcella back to the Starks. Joffrey had none of it, and said as much to his family. Eddard Stark and his whelp had nothing to say of the match, but Robb Stark had returned north, which Joffrey saw as a positive change. When Joffrey and his new wife stood at the altar, he could not help but gaze at the silent tears trailing down her perfect face. She looked at him with a quivering lip and emerald eyes, and he could not help the smile that came to his lips. Tears of joy, she is excited as I am. Squeezing her hand, he recited the words the Septon had spoke, and replaced her maiden cloak with his own. His mind drifted to thoughts of the bedding ceremony which he was certainly looking forward to. Underscore 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 underscore. Early 300 AC. A few short months after the wedding, and Joffrey was already beginning to lose patience with his wife, she a single job, to spread her legs for her king, and for whatever she couldn't even do that properly. He was tired of having Sitrand coerce her, and he was even more tired of his lack of heir. I'll need a son to legitimize my reign, you'd do well to explain why you are unable to accommodate me. Joffrey tried to hide his anger. Myrcella always cried when he got angry. And Mother always got mad when she cried. I'm ruling 7 kingdoms, yet you can't seem to even do your one job properly. I'm sorry, Your Grace. Tears began to form in the corner of Myrcella's eyes, and she began to shake uncontrollably. I'll try harder, I promise. For his part, Joffrey ignored the tears, and could only focus on the purple bruise covering the left side of her face. I should have told Citrand not in the face. She looks awful. Perhaps I should have considered the Tyrell girl or even the Savage one. They might have been able to provide me a son by now. There was still time, of course. Stark's 2 daughters remain at court. I know you will, we both will. Joffrey put his hand on her arm, and she jerked away almost automatically. He frowned, then without thinking, he put his hand on her chin, and forced her to look at him. Her tears flowed freely now as she looked into his eyes. No need to be afraid, we can try right now if you wish. There's no need for that, Your Grace. She said. After a moment she added, please. Don't be foolish, sweet sister. The kingdoms need us to do our duty. Now, don't make me angry. I wouldn't want to have to call in Citrand again. 300 AC. I beg of you, Your Grace. I can hardly afford to feed my own children. The taxes have been increased twice this year alone. If they are to go up higher, I don't know what I would do. The man begged before him. The commoner wore his best clothes, which were still dirty, and Joffrey suspected covered in fleas. The man had a gaunt face, as if he hadn't eaten in a few days. He appeared to be a weak man, made weaker by the obvious lack of food. Is there nothing you can do to help us? Nothing he could do to help him. What a curious line of thought. Joffrey knew the realm was in debt, just as he knew that the members of the small council had no solutions for him. Tywin refused to erase the debt the crown owed the Lannisters, and offered few solutions besides limiting spending. The other members of the small council are much the same, with only Petyr Baelish suggesting a raise on taxes. How could the people not see it? Raising taxes was best for the realm, and was best for the realm was best for the people. Joffrey swore to himself, and sat forward in his chair, ready to make his decision. You can't feed your children, I'm sorry to hear, but due to the actions of Lord Arryn and my foolish uncle Renly, the kingdom is in the midst of some financial troubles, Joffrey said in a bored tone. However, there is something I can do for you. It is my duty as king to look out for those who can't help themselves. Since you are obviously unable to feed your children, and too weak-willed to control your urges, it will be for the good of the realm, and yourself, to assure you can't have another child. Sir Payne, please have this man gelded. The man looked up in horror. Before he could say a word, he was already being dragged away. The murmurs of the court began to increase as the man kicked and screamed, begging for mercy. Sir Payne, take his tongue if he continues to struggle. Joffrey shouted, which succeeded in silencing the man. Yet, the sounds of the court only increased. After a moment, Joffrey turned to the new hand of the king and spoke. The crown's work is never done, grandfather. Joffrey smiled, although Tywin looked unamused. In the corner of his eye, Joffrey noticed the members of his small council react with a mixture of disgust and surprise. Even his new master of ships, Lord Mallister of Seaguard, seemed disgusted. That was unwise, Your Grace, Tywin counseled by his side. It would have been better to give a false promise, than to have him tortured. As if to emphasize Tywin's point, the man's scream could be heard echoing the walls of the Red Keep. It would have been wise for that peasant to accept his king's verdict, Joffrey replied, eyes narrowing at his grandfather. Their relationship had been on edge recently, with not even his mother able to bridge the gap between them. If things continued this way, Joffrey would need a new hand. Tywin said nothing, only turning to look forward as the next petitioner made his way through the halls of the Red Keep. The Black Brother of the Night's Watch, introduced as Yoren, was a recruiter for the Night's Watch. He walked towards the throne with purpose. However, he seemed to care not the least about his surroundings. Your Grace, the recruiter began. He cleared his hoarse voice before continuing. The Night's Watch is in dire need of help. We number less than 1,000 men at the moment. We're running low on every supply imaginable, and there's news of a king beyond the wall. A man named Mance Rayder. He marches with a host of 60,000 men. Voices broke out in the grand hall as he spoke of the king beyond the wall. A king beyond the wall, who cares? Joffrey asked, genuinely curious. He can have that wasteland, there's nothing there besides ice and snow. Eddard Stark tensed visibly with the news. There's more, Your Grace. Yoren looked around and seemed hesitant to speak. There's talk of the others returning, one even attacked the Lord Commander. It nearly killed him too. If it wasn't for the intervention of a new recruit, he would have been killed. Others. What's next, Snooks and Grumpkins? I mistook you for a man, not a child with his head full of nonsense. Joffrey laughed, and the court soon followed. The entire hall echoed with laughter, and the man of the Night's Watch grew more agitated. This is a serious matter. Yoren yelled. If the wall falls, the wildlings will invade the north, and then they'll come down here. That's nothing if the others truly returned. If that's the case, only the gods can help us. That silenced the laughter. The gods have never been very kind to me, Your Grace. It's better to handle this situation before it starts. Is the situation really that dire? No, he's just wants my coin. Likely to spend on some whore like the halfling. But still, I better at least make a show of helping him. Maybe I should order Lord Stark to handle the situation. No, that would make me seem reliant on my bannermen. You say you need men. Joffrey smiled, as an idea suddenly came to him. Very well, Grandfather, have Lord Slynt round up some peasants for our dear friend here. Have the Gold Cloaks round up any beggar in the city. They provide nothing but waste to the city, and would be much better suited to the north. Now, if that's all, you're dismissed. Joffrey shooed the man away. Yoren looked at him in utter shock and disgust as he was led from the room. That won't be necessary, Tywin spoke up. His look made it clear that Joffrey's verdict was to be ignored. Lord Stark, the north is your domain. What say you on this matter? Eddard Stark gave an appreciative glance to Tywin before speaking. I will send word to Lord Umber of Last Hearth and the Northern Mountain clans. I shall also send word to Winterfell to alert my son and heir of the situation. Those forces should prove more than adequate to stop the king behind the wall. Good, you may also have free pick of the castle dungeons, and are free to ask for volunteers within the Gold Cloaks and city limits. A thank you would have been nice. Joffrey thought as the Night's Watchman bowed to them, before turning on his heel, leaving Joffrey with his disobedient grandfather. Monster. Murderer. Rapist. How odd, I don't think I raped anyone. I would have definitely remembered that. No matter, peasants will talk, as mother always said. No need to concern oneself with the opinions of the sheep. He rode his horse through the city, making his way to the Great September of Baelor in order to meet with the High Septon. Some matter of purity or the other. Joffrey didn't care, and was instead thinking of the way to handle his marital situation. Perhaps a gold necklace with fine emeralds. It would match her hair and eyes so perfectly. I'm sure Myrcella would love it. We could make a day of it. I can take her to the finest jewelers in the city. His musings were interrupted, as suddenly a rock hit the side of his face. It was a small rock, and only caused his lower lip to bust open. He tasted blood. It wasn't a completely horrible taste, but Joffrey felt rage take control of him in an instant. Sir Trant. Your Grace, I'm sorry, I didn't realize what was. Kill them all. Lady Sansa. Joffrey smiled to the girl who idolized the royal family to an obnoxious extent. The Stark girl with hair of spun copper and a budding figure that indicated she was on the cusp of womanhood. At 4 and 10, and even in an unflattering northern dress which did everything to hide her figure, it was clear she was one of the realm's beauties. As she aged she would only become more beautiful, a lady to rival Myrcella in every respect. I'm so happy you could join me for a walk. Of course, Your Grace. Sansa curtsied to him, a smile on her face. Her hair was done in one of the southern fashions, in a clear attempt to imitate Joffrey's own mother. He could never understand Sansa's infatuation with the Queen Dowager, but he would not question something that was so clearly to his benefit. Is Prince Myrcella coming along? She asked with a hint of confusion. Her river blue eyes looked around the Red Keep nervously. Not today, I'm afraid. It will just be the two. Don't mind, do you? He offered his arm, which she took after a moment of hesitation, a blush on her face that matched her hair. No, of course not, Sansa replied quickly, afraid to offend the prince. The girl was almost too innocent. She would never expect a king to do anything unsightly to an innocent maiden. Not that Joffrey believed she was innocent. There was little doubt in his mind a northern beauty like Sansa assuredly had half of the Red Keep by this point, and more than like some of the peasantry. He looked at her with unconcealed disgust, but the girl did not notice, far too focused on the scenery. His uncle and Sandor Clegane, Joffrey's favorite members of the Kingsguard, fell into step behind them. As they made their way to the Godswood, he ordered his 2 guards to stand vigil outside, not desiring to be interrupted. Once again Sansa seemed confused, but said nothing. She had to know how it looks to be alone in the Godswood with her king, but she says nothing, a harlot if there ever was one. Surrounded by nature, it was quiet. Sansa was prattling on about something, but he wasn't truly listening. Joffrey found himself staring at her lips, and unconsciously licked his own. He handed her his wineskin silently. "Drink," he ordered, and she obeyed. Sipping the fine Dornish red with hesitation. She stopped, and looked at him, asking for permission to stop. "It's for you, my lady, I insist you drink it." "My father does not like it when I drink," she explained, but he waved off her concerns with a smile. "Your lord father is not here, sweeterling, drink, I insist." He took the wineskin from her, and raised it to her lips. Her cheeks were the same color as her skin as he raised the wineskin, so the liquid poured into her mouth, the sweet red liquid ran down her lips. Her cheeks were rosy when he lowered the wineskin, and she smiled at him. He kissed her without warning, enjoying the taste of her mouth mixed with the costly wine. He wrapped his arms around her, deepening the kiss even as she moved away in a vain attempt to create distance between them. In truth, he enjoyed the friction it created as she rubbed against him. "You're married." Sansa pushed him away, her blue eyes widened in surprise. She backed away from the king slowly, against a heart tree with a frown of blood-red sap. "My wife is not here either." He reached out to her, grabbing her arm and pulling her closer to him. She struggled, bringing back fond memories of his own wedding night. He reached underneath the dress, and felt her breasts, which were larger than Myrcilla's. He pulled at her dress, tearing the fabric and revealing her bojam. The slap across his face was done with perhaps more force than Sansa meant, but it sent the king sprawling to the floor, his crown falling in the groan caked with mud. He fell into the ancient heart tree, cutting his arm on a branch that stuck forth. Sansa was already gone when he stood to his feet, her back to him as she ran deeper and deeper in the Godswood. "Uncle, Sandor. I want that whore found." H's voice was shrill even in his own ears, and his King Swanites were confused to find him on the ground. Underscore 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 underscore. "I am the king." Joffrey managed to stammer out, in spite of the fear he felt coiled in his stomach like a Dornish snake. His hands were shaking, and he could not meet Eddard Stark's fierce grey eyes, nor his grandfather's unimpressed gaze. "I can do as I please, and I can have your head for questioning me." He hoped he sounded as fierce as he intended, but knew his efforts were in vain. He was terrified, far more scared than he could ever recall. He was not in control of this situation. He was called to the Tower of the Hand and half dragged by men in stark armor to stand in judgment before his grandfather and the stern Eddard Stark. The wolf and lion looked ready to devour him, and he knew he did not look the part of a fierce king. As his uncle Tyrion's bodyguard had so eloquently put it before being forced to leave, he looked as if he was ready to piss in his breeches. "I can have your head for this." He raised his hand, pointing the grim-faced Eddard Stark, who stood up at Joffrey's accusation. The quiet wolf of the north slammed his fist on the table, and spoke with icy venom. "She told me of what you attempted. You tried to make a whore of my daughter." Eddard Stark screamed at him, and it was such a rare sight to see the Northman lose control that Joffrey took a step back. He felt his back come in contact with his mother, whom he had forced to come with him for reasons he did not quite want to admit to himself. His confidence leaked from him as if from an unpatched wound. "Everything in the kingdom is the king's property, Lord Stark. You should be aware of the law. If not, I fear you're an even poorer replacement for Renly than I dared dream possible." Cersei spoke, and in that moment, Joffrey truly loved his mother for defending him in spite of the circumstances. "If the king wants a whore to warm his bed, then there is none finer than your daughter." If this is the way you are, Robert was fortunate in death if it meant escaping you. You can allow him to make a whore of your daughter if you so desire, but king or not, he will never be allowed near mine again. Eddard reached to his chest, and threw the badge of his office at the king. The silver brooch hit Joffrey's doublet before clanging to the floor. I resign from my position, and me and my daughters shall be heading north immediately. In a moment of hazy clarity, Joffrey's anger overrode the fear he felt, and the confidence so mother distilled back into him brought forth his unrighteous fury. Stop him. Sandor, bring me the traitor's head. Neither Sandor nor Jaime made a move to stop Eddard Stark, on the contrary, they gave him a wide berth. Blood rushed to his head in his fury, turning him Lannister crimson. He slammed his small fists on the desk before him. I am your king, I demand you listen, I want that traitor's head. Any man who must say I am the king, is no true king. Tywin Lannister spoke, and Joffrey felt the fear return as he turned to his grandfather. At the head of the table, Tywin looked anything but amused. Sandor, see the king and his mother out safely if you would. I will join them shortly. Sandor and Jaime did not hesitate to follow Tywin's orders. The two Kingsguard quickly grabbed Joffrey's arms and began dragging him in spite of his protests. Their grip on him felt like steel as he had not hoped for escape. As he and his mother left the chamber in defeat, he heard his grandfather speak. Lord Stark, a word before you go. Underscore 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 underscore. You betrayed me. Joffrey accused the moment that Tywin had come to see him. It had been hours, and his mind was rattling with what the two of them could have discussed. Was it treason, he wondered? Did they plan on replacing him with the weak-willed Tommen or one his useless uncles? That was foolish. Trying to take advantage of that Stark girl, and dishonoring your wife, Tywin chastised after a moment of silence. He walked to Joffrey's own desk and sat down. Rhaegar Targaryen did something similar once, and you know what happened to him, of course. You dare question me? Eddard Stark was arguably your most loyal vassal before this. He would have gladly died for any son of Robert Baratheon. Now, we'll be lucky if he ever appears in King's Landing again. I was able to minimize the damage. I suggested a match between Tommen and his youngest daughter, among other things. In truth, it's fortunate he even agreed. If he did not, your situation here would be perilous at best. He disobeyed me, I should have his head. Joffrey stated, seemingly ignoring his grandfather's statement. Their loyalty matters not. If they act as traitors, they will be treated as traitors. The North carries the loyalty of the Vale and the Riverlands with it. To secure your hold on the throne, we need the Starks. I wonder, if we took his head, what do you think would happen? Would the North sit idly by? How about the lords of the Vale and the Riverlands who love Stark like he's their own? Would Mace Tyrell and Renly Baratheon rush to our aid after you humiliated them? If Eddard Stark was killed in King's Landing, we would not be long to follow. Tywin spoke calmly. He's a traitor, you're a traitor too. You disobeyed me. Joffrey said, as his grandfather looked at him with disinterest. Do you know what happens to traitors? If your father is any indication, they are given a crown, Tywin commented. You dare, I want you off my council. Joffrey screamed. I have no need for men who question me. There was a pause. Joffrey was breathing heavily by this point, his face was covered in sweat, and his blonde hair lay limply across his face. His mother grabbed his arm as if to pull him back, but she would not dare step between him and her own father. Tywin rose to his full height. Opposing as he was, Joffrey took a step back as Tywin moved closer. He looked into his grandfather's eyes, who seemed lost in thought. After a moment, Tywin calmly removed his badge of honor, signifying his position as Hand of the King, and allowed it to drop to the floor before Joffrey. If that is what you wish, I have little desire to tie my legacy to you. However, before I depart, I am going to make a few things clear. Tommen shall be coming to Casterly Rock with me, Jaime shall accompany on my journey back to the Rock, and he may return upon our arrival. Your uncle Tyrion shall stay here as a member of your small council and as my eyes in the capital, as your mother has proven unfit for such a small task. House Lannister shall no longer support the crown in any capacity, and within a moon's turn, I will expect the first payment on the debt the crown owes to Casterly Rock. If you have an issue with any of this, I do suggest you remember who you're talking to. Is that clear, Your Grace? Tywine Wurst stunned Joffrey into silence. Instead, the boy king simply nodded dumbly at his grandfather, who seemed amused at his response. Good, but one last thing. Family or not, if you ever threaten me again, you will be replaced. Tywine walked through the door of Joffrey's chambers without another word. Underscore 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 underscore. Joffrey hated being coddled. He was not Tommen, he was the Crown Prince of Westeros. Since his crowning he distanced himself from his mother. He did not need the small folk whispering he was nothing more than a boy being controlled by his mother. He needed to be strong, yet even he knew when he needed help. In normal circumstance he would turn to his mother, who in spite of her many flaws, was always there for him. However, these days she would not be much help. As unfortunate as that was, she was simply too unstable since he and grandfather had a falling out. It was not out of the ordinary to find his mother in the company of 2 empty wine bottles and his cousin Lancel. At some point he would have to talk with her about her obvious alcoholism, but it wasn't a priority for him. Now that Jaime and grandfather had returned to the Rock, it seemed his mother had been on a downward spiral that could only be treated with copious amounts of expensive wine. It reminded him of father. No, that wasn't quite right. His father was always happy when he was drunk. His mother was reminding him of his uncle Tyrion, which was to say angry and sad. Either way he could not turn to her in his time of need. You understand, of course. Joffrey spoke to his companion, who seemed slightly amused. With the 4 wardens of the realm having failed at their respective duties, and the realm in desperate need of order, I am in need of a strong and qualified hand. The Starks, Tyrells, Lannisters, and Arryns have all failed me, so I ask that you take up the great responsibility and honor as Hand of the King. Your Grace pearly white teeth widened to an almost innocent smirk. It would be my honor to serve the realm. Petter Baelish spoke with a grin, smelling faintly of mint. With what? Underscore 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 underscore. Tywine Lannister POV. Underscore 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 underscore. His children had failed him, or perhaps, just maybe, he had failed them. Cersei was a horrible mother and didn't understand the limitations placed on her by society, yet he had always tried to give her everything she wanted. Even marrying her to Robert was her wish, though she would never admit it now, preferring the version of the story where he sold her like a broodmare. The less said about Tyrion the better. Tywine could admit he was a clever schemer, but the truth of the matter was that he was a dwarf. Worse yet, he was a foul-mouthed alcoholic dwarf who whored himself throughout the 7 kingdoms. Tywine could acknowledge his fault in that situation, and perhaps if Johanna yet lived, he could find it in his heart to love such a broken creature. Jaime perhaps was the biggest disappointment of them, was to be his successor, and instead, he was a glorified gold cloak guarding a madman who had more interest in raping his sister and strangling kittens than ruling the realm. History repeated itself in the worst of ways, and with every year of such nonsense Tywine began to doubt his ability to fix it. He refused most recent offer of staying in the Rock and marrying Margaery Tyrell, which meant Tywine had to let Highgarden fall into the Starks' hands. Tywine felt his age. In all of his years, from the days of his youth playing in Casterly Rock with his brother Kevan, to the day his grandchildren came into this world, Tywine never felt old. Truthfully, he still didn't feel old in the traditional sense, he was just weary of the days to come. When Joffrey was first crowned in the Great September of Baelor, he never felt more proud. Years of planning finally coming to fruition, a Lannister on the throne. Then, things changed. Initially, Joffrey seemed to be on his way to being a good king, a great king even. Appointing Mace Tyrell and Eddard Stark to the small council was a move of political genius unexpected in a man so young. Tywin's own appointment as Hand also allowed him to oversee the realm, and assure the stability of the Seven Kingdoms. Tywin had plans to unite the three strongest of the Seven Kingdoms under one dynasty. There were 2 marital contracts in the works before Joffrey made his announcement to marry his own sister, Myrcella Baratheon, to Robb Stark, an alliance that would have truly united the North and the South. If Robb Stark was even half the man his father was, Myrcella would be hard-pressed to find a better match. Not only that, but the North would rise for the Iron Throne for generations. The second, Margaery Tyrell to Joffrey Baratheon, an alliance that would give the throne access to the largest army in the Seven Kingdoms. Even the dragons would be unable to stand against such an alliance. The lion, the wolf, and the rose, it would buy a dynasty that would last for 1,000 years. The stag might be its symbol, but the world would know power descend from the lion. However, fate had other plans, and Joffrey dashed the Grand Alliance within the course of a fortnight. Joffrey married his sister, and made Tywin look like a fool in front of the other Lord Paramounts for not keeping his word. That decision of Joffrey's to marry Myrcella, that stupid, foolish, irreversible decision cost Tywin more than he would like to admit. If that wasn't enough, what Joffrey did to the Stark girl, what he tried to do thankfully. If Sir Trant or anyone else was with the king that day instead of Jaime, there would have been rebellion. Would Eddard Stark sit idly by his daughter was defiled by his king? No, of course not. Jaime saved us from a second Robert's rebellion that day. I wonder if he even realizes it. Joffrey would have destroyed the realm if it wasn't for Jaime Lannister, and he would have destroyed a dozen more times if it wasn't for the work of Tywin Lannister. Tywin worked to assure the realm wouldn't fall to pieces as Joffrey made himself the laughingstock of the realm, and even then, the boy found ways to disappoint. 3,782 gold dragons, that was the payment that arrived from the crown, correct? Tywin asked, already knowing the answer, his face unreadable mask of indignation and fury. More than 20,000 gold dragons short of the expected first payment, Kevan responded grimly. If anyone was as angry as Tywin about this whole affair, it was him. There is also a note from Tyrion. He sends his apologies, but explains that the coffers are empty, and that King has requested another loan of 1 million gold dragons. Kevan finished with a disappointed sigh. Shall I write back refusing? No, you shall not. Kevan seemed surprised. Write back to him, and inform my son that the Iron Throne is cut off from all Lannister resources. I will be calling in all debts I have in the Crown Lands, Stormlands, and in King's Landing. There will be no more loans, and I will contact representatives in the Iron Bank and urge them to the same. What are you doing? There will be a full-on rebellion by the time this letter reaches Tyrion. Kevan asked incredulously. What must be done? Tywin looked at his brother who seemed to understand. Kevan bowed before leaving the room. At his brother's departure, Tywin turned back to the paper on his discuss, a marital contract that only required his signature to make it official. A match between his bastard niece Joyhill and Eddard Stark's bastard son Jon Snow. The boy would be given the lordship of Sea Dragon Point, where Eddard Stark had grand visions of a western White Harbor. It would normally be a fool's errand, but with Lannister support, it was a possibility. He signed the contract after a moment of hesitation, agreeing to a dowry fit for a princess just to assure Stark support when the time came. There was a soft knock at his door which brought him out of his musings, and what sounded like whispers just beyond the threshold. Tywin was slightly annoyed, but unsurprised. He allowed himself a small sigh. Come in. Tywin said calmly. He looked sharply at the intruders. 2 individuals walked into the room, a boy and a girl, both young, and little more than children. The boy, Tywin's own grandson, Tommen, seemed afraid to even be in this room. The girl on the other hand looked confident and sure of herself, almost as if she belonged. What is it? Tywin asked, slightly impatient. We want to know where the glittering pools are. Arya Stark said earnestly. Behind her, Tommen nodded nervously, but immediately went back to hiding behind Arya. My mother always mentioned swimming in them with Uncle Jaime, Tommen offered cautiously. And you decided to bother me with this? Tywin asked incredulously. Glancing between the 2 youths, as Tommen seemed to retreat further into his shell, while Arya remained confident. Arya Stark was impulsive, short-tempered, and the opposite of what a lady was supposed to be. It reminded him of Circe at a younger age, a slightly more reckless, but somehow nicer Circe. He hated to admit, but Tywin actually enjoyed her company. It reminded him of days long since past. It reminded him of Joanna. No one in the Seven Kingdoms knows Winterfell like my father. Was it too much to presume that no one knows Casterly Rock like you? Arya asked. She was tamping her foot impatiently, almost hopping back and forth. If he recalled, she wanted to be a warrior, and her father was content to let her have whatever she wanted. It's rude to barge into a man's solar like this. Tywin chastised, and he had to bite back anger as Arya rolled her eyes. It's truly unbefitting of a lady, especially one who is to marry a prince. I'm no lady, besides, I didn't barge, I knocked this time. I remember how mad you got last time I barged in here without warning. Arya explained, slightly flustered. Tywin sighed again, and fought to remain calm. Very well then, the glittering pools are in Casterly Rock's basement. It is quite dangerous to go alone, so wait here, and I shall call a servant to accompany you down. Why don't you just come with us? You know the way, don't you? Arya, don't. Tommen urged, grabbing Arya's arm and moving her towards the door. Very well, I shall show you the way myself. But remember, Lady Stark, be careful. Tywin rose from his seat, and made his way to the door. If all goes well, that girl shall be queen soon enough. The Alliance shall be reborn, and the Lannisters shall have no more threats to their power. And Joffrey will finally learn, a Lannister always repays his debts. Underscore 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 underscore. Myrcella POV. The strike came suddenly, a blow across the left side of her face that left her staggering. Almost immediately she knew it would bruise. The coppery taste of blood filled her mouth, and she looked up at her tormentor, just in time to receive a hard slap that echoed throughout her husband's solar. Do you think this is funny? Joffrey asked, and he debated on hitting her again. I said you were not to send any more letters. Did I not make myself clear enough? I swear, your grace. Myrcella fell to her knees almost on instinct. I sent no letters, just as you commanded. Then what is this? He threw the letter down before her. The lettering was in a small rough print, sealed with a crimson wax seal bearing the Lannister emblem. The message was from Tommen, straight from Casterly Rock, there her brother warded with her grandfather, living happily with his betrothed. I sent no letter, your grace, I swear, he sent it to me. I have had no contact with Tommen since he left for Casterly Rock. She whimpered, looking down. She could not bring herself to look up into her tormentor's crazed eyes. If she did, she knew she would only see herself looking back. You think you're clever, don't you? Joffrey asked. He laughed slightly at that, then his features straightened out again. He leaned into her, wrapped his hand around her mouth, and forced her to look into his eyes. She felt herself blinking back tears. He sighed. You know I hate seeing you upset, Myrcella. His voice turned soft, still looking into her eyes. He pressed a forceful kiss to her lips, pressing his tongue into her mouth as he did, and biting her lip, drawing blood. He broke the kiss suddenly, smiled, and slapped her with all of his might, open palmed against the cheek. She fell to the floor, stunned from the force of the impact. She could hear both Joffrey and Sitrand laughing at her. She truly struggled not to cry. Instead she just brought herself back to her feet, and stared downwards, avoiding her husband's gaze when she could. Joffrey stopped laughing, and looked her up and down. There was a slight smile on his face. He put his finger to the corner of her mouth, wiping off the blood that trailed downwards. You can go. I have a small council meeting tonight, so I won't be at dinner, but Mother is expecting you. He said, absent-mindedly rubbed the crimson blood between his thumb and index finger as he walked away. Myrcella nodded obediently, turned, and moved to walk from her husband's solar. As she made her way to her own chambers, she avoided the look of everyone and anyone. Her uncle Tyrion no longer talked to her, not because he didn't want to, but because Joffrey wouldn't let him near her. Tommen was lost to her. He escaped this place, and from what little she heard of him, was happy with his new betrothed, the youngest Stark girl. It wasn't that long ago when she was excited about the prospect of marrying. she even had a certain Stark in mind ironically. Now she just kept moving in a blur, hoping for her days to end quickly. As she made her way inside her room, she opened the door, and then fell to her knees. She allowed herself to cry, to be as broken on the outside as she felt on the inside. She heard someone enter the room and shut the door. She need not look up, she already knew who it was. "It will be okay," Jamie hushed softly as he wrapped his arms around her frail form. She could see his hollow eyes, the way he shook just like her, but instead of sorrow, she knew Jamie only felt rage. Rage for the injustice that was cast upon her, and rage for his inability to do anything. "He's a monster," Ursula whispered, and she lifted her head to look into her uncle's eyes. She never knew so much shame than in that moment. For when she looked up, Jamie quickly diverted his gaze, unwilling to look at the bruises already covering much of her face. "Uncle, I need you to do it. I can't do this, not for much longer," she whispered, and she felt him squeeze her tighter, and run a hand through her hair. "Ursula, I can't, not again," he whispered, and he enveloped her in another tight hug. "I'm already a Kingslayer, and if it was anyone else I would do so without hesitation, but I can't kill him, he's fam. Your son," she interrupted. His eyes widened, and locked with her own, before Jamie quickly looked down again. "I know he's your son, as I know I am your daughter," she rasped out against his arm. The tears slowed down now. "I have known for a long time now, I have lied for so long to protect you, and Tommen, and Mother, but I don't know if I can lie any longer, not when life is like this." Jamie remained silent, but he didn't let go of his daughter. He remained still like a statue, like a guardian. "You have no idea how many times I've began writing a letter to Lord Stark or Uncle Stannis, telling them I'm nothing more than a bastard, an abomination, just to throw the letter in a fire as soon as I think of you or Tommen." Ursula cried out, her throat felt sore, and her face lit up with another wave of pain. "Kill him, please, kill your son, and save your daughter." There were no words spoken, and Ursula didn't expect there to be any, but still, she wondered. Jamie was her friend, perhaps her only one at this rate. He was her shadow, following her through the halls of the Red Keep, rarely ever saying a word, but he was always there. Now he refused to meet her eyes, and she wondered if she lost her only friend in the world. She needed to do something, because she knew, if there was ever a day that Joffrey smelled the tansy on her breath, she knew her days were numbered. Underscore 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 underscore. They had failed him, every last one. There was not a soul in Theseus' 7 kingdoms he could rely on. Every citizen of Westeros from Dawn to the Wall proved to be little more than a disappointment. His own wife, his sister Ursula, could not even be trusted, and it seemed that every day she spent more time with their uncle Jaime avoiding him. In truth, Joffrey was afraid that Jaime would be Kingslayer as well as Kingslayer soon enough. His own grandfather had betrayed him, robbing the crown of whatever status they had in less than a moon's turn, and turning his grandson into a beggar. Paranoia was beginning to creep into his every thought, and it wasn't long before he hired a food tester and surrounded himself with his Kingsguard at every moment. Even when he was with his wife at night, he required that one be in the room with him. The Mad King went through ordeal. Joffrey realized how hard it must have been for Aerys when everyone was plotting his downfall with a smile etched on their faces. Perhaps he was not as mad as they all said. Renly, Stannis, his own grandfather, mayhaps even Eddard Stark and Jon Arryn if the rumors of banners being called north had any truth in it, but he doubted it. It was Varys and only Varys who spoke of Eddard's rebellion, and for whatever reason, Joffrey got the distinct feeling the eunuch was pushing him towards madness for his own goals. But the whispers of rebellion would have to wait, for the situation at home was just as deadly, but far closer than whatever was happening up north. "Can you repeat that, uncle?" He leaned closer to his master of coin, and tried to hide his nervousness, pouring himself a cup of wine, a Stormlands vintage of exceedingly low quality, the best they could afford given the circumstances. "Your grandfather, my father, has recalled all debts in the Crown lands and the Storm lands. The Iron Bank has sent a representative at Lord Tywyn's behest, asking for the money. Tyrion's face was grim and he had not touched his wine. We're broke, and by week's end, we won't be able to pay for the gold cloaks, never mind the chaos in King's Landing Father's announcement has caused. Joffrey made a mental note to talk with Lord Baelish about restoring order in King's Landing. Things were desperate, and he had no doubt that he would be forced to sell whatever treasures the crown kept in its vaults. Aegon's crown, the Valyrian steel sphinxes kept in the small council chambers, maybe even his father's warhammer if things became truly desperate. Our options. The king finished his wine in one impressive gulp and reached back for the bottle. Cut all spending, which would include firing the gold cloaks. Our real options, uncle. I have no patience for any verbal sparring at the moment. Joffrey slammed his glass, and his uncle looked at him with hate. Joffrey knew if he allowed, Tyrion would be on his way back to Casterly Rock before week's end, with all the other traitors bastards, but he would never allow it. Tyrion was useful in his own way, even if he was a drunken dwarf, he contained a valuable level of cunning that was in short supply in King's Landing. We seek a loan, from anyone and everyone who can give us one. The Tyrells, Tiroshi trading cartels, Carthian traders, the Hightowers, Mandaelis, Frizz, and even your uncle Renly. Each has coin they can loan us that will keep us afloat for a time. Tyrion rubbed the dark blonde beard on his face, and stared at Joffrey with mismatched eyes. He's a vile little thing, Joffrey thought, turning his nose in disgust. Try every option, if that fails, find more. I want taxes raised as well, double them across the board, quadruple them in Lannisport, and remind grandfather who's king. His fingers tapped gently on his desk, betraying his nervousness. Tyrion's eyes widened in a what seemed like surprise. I would not recommend angering your grandfather, there's a reason that he's feared across these 7 kingdoms. Yes, because he murdered babes and slaughtered those weaker than him. Do not think to lecture your king, uncle. Follow your orders, or I will have you thrown in the black cells, or I'll send your head to the grandfather as a gift. Joffrey threatened, which succeeded in silencing his uncle, who glared at him with undisguised malice. I will make something clear to my grandfather. Repaying debts is all well and good, but if he expects me to allow him to hold my kingdom hostage, he needs to think again. I see, Tyrion said simply. He rose from his chair, as far as dwarf could rise anyway, and made for the door. With what could be considered a mockbow, he quickly made his way from the room. Underscore 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 underscore. Jaime Lannister, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard after Barristan's arranged accident, Kingslayer, the Lion of Lannisters, and a list of other titles that were quite impressive. The Kingslayer stared at him with hollow eyes, and with a few days of stubble. The rags he wore didn't reflect his golden hair, did not shine like it once did, nor did his emerald eyes. He was a shell of his former self, barely fit for the white cloak he once wore. The man was dirty, and he was in chains before his king. You don't like me, Joffrey accused. Meryn Trant, Preston Greenfield, and Saboros Blount stood at his back. As was his wife, who was shaking like a leaf and crying as Meryn Trant held her in place silently. His mother wasn't here, nor would he allow her to be. He would spare her from this if he could. Yogra. As he spoke, Preston Greenfield attacked him, punching him in his face with steel-covered gauntlet and knocking him to the floor. A blow to the ribs allowed a sickening crack to echo in the room as Myrcella begged it to stop. Please, Your Grace, it was Mother, it was never Jaime. Please, let him go. I swear to you I will. He slapped her hard enough that she fell to the floor, and Jaime rose to his feet, only to be forced to ground once more by Preston Greenfield's strikes. Enough of your lies! Joffrey screamed, spittle flying into the Queen's face. I will not have you besmirch Mother's name to cover for our traitor uncle. Take her to the Maiden Vault. You will not feed her until I say so, and she will not see the light of day until I have a son. She was dragged away by a few gold cloaks. The Kingsguard would stay with him. Why did you provide Myrcella with moon tea? Was it to cover up a bastard, an affair? Joffrey accused Jaime. The White Lion looked up with blood dripping from his lips and with a sad smile. No, Your Grace, a bastard should never sit on the Iron Throne. underscore 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 underscore. There is to be a wedding in Riverrun. Varys bowed his head as he entered Joffrey's solar at a time when most men would be resting. Myrcella, his whore wife, was not in his room, but rather in the maiden vault. In truth, he missed her company, but cared little for her at the moment. He could content himself with whores like his father before him. Wonderful, so you decide to intrude upon my personal space to inform me that the Edmure Floppy Fish Tully is marrying a free whore. He looked up from the offer he received from the Far East. Alone with a relatively low interest rate compared to that of the Iron Bank, he agreed to it without a second thought. You can leave now. If you tarry long I might reconsider my generosity and take your head. Your Grace, Varys muttered softly, bowing low again but not leaving. I did not come here with news of the Tully heir being married, but rather the northern heir. Robb Stark is being married to Margaery Tyrell in Riverrun in a moon's turn. He is currently in Highgarden to know his betrothed, and from there the two will be married, before the lords of 5 of the great houses. The news of the wedding received Joffrey's full attention, and he looked at the eunuch with actual concern. 5 of the great houses at one wedding was almost unheard of. Only 2 had been at his wedding, Mace Tyrell having returned home beforehand, and Renly not bothering to show up, though Stannis had for what little that meant. Grandfather is going to that whelp's wedding, Joffrey questioned, and Varys confirmed with a sad smile and a bow of his fat bald head. This is close to treason. No, Your Grace, this is treason. There are whispers across these 7 kingdoms, that your grandfather means to dethrone you and place Tommen as king. Your uncle Renly has recently made a trip to Highgarden to see what support he would have for a bid on the Iron Throne. Stannis waits at Dragonstone, and you already know the stories. Balon Greyjoy has been gathering swords on Pike, and now there is even rumor of the Daenerys Targaryen of the Great Grass Sea, whose husband has been taken to slave trading to fund ships to take her to Westeros. Gods only know when they will be ready to sail. It seems I'm surrounded, Joffrey said quietly and offered a sad smile. What would you recommend? It's best to act now before this alliance can be finalized. Robb Stark can be captured as he returns from Highgarden, and can stay here as a guest. Your grandfather can be forced to hand over your brother and Arya Stark, and your uncle you can make use of. Write him a letter, tell him to capture Robb Stark, and he will see this as an opportunity to prove himself. The logic behind each decision was solid, but still Varys always had an ulterior motive. Joffrey would do best to ignore most of the advice given, and discount most of these rumors as his attempt to drive him closer to madness. Certain advice Varys gave was meant to send him into ruin. Capturing Robb Stark was foolish, and would certainly bring war. Telling Renly to do it would just drive them further apart, as Renly would simply not follow his orders. They would all be at war with one another by the end of a moon's turn. Still there was much to consider. Balon Greyjoy was the obvious threat, and he would have to be dealt with, and Renly with the Royal Navy at his back could deal with the threat. He could make this work. He would force Stannis and Renly to work together. Stannis would be in charge of the navy, and he would offer to assure Stannis of his right to Dragonstone and his position of master ships back when they succeed. Renly could be Hand of the King. In truth, he would not do either, but it would still force his enemies to fight one another for the time being. That still left the issue of grandfather and Eddard Stark. Leaning back in his chair, he sighed. Leave Varys, find Lord Baelish and send him in at once. We have much to discuss. It seems it would be a long night after all. Underscore 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 underscore. There was a hushed silence in the small council chambers as Petyr Baelish spoke. The news that had arrived just that morning was weighing heavily on everyone's mind, except his. He drank deeply from his wine cup and smiled at the news. Balon Greyjoy has declared himself King of the Iron Isles. Once again, Storm's End is under siege by Victorian Greyjoy, and your uncle Renly marches to King's Landing with whatever swords he could gather. Lord Baelish offers a smile to his king. Such insolence, Grand Maester Pycelle wheezed. King Robert had done Balon a favor by sparing his life, and now he rises again in rebellion. Unacceptable. We must do something about this. The wedding. Joffrey asked, ignoring the Grand Maester entirely. The king drank deeply from his cup as Tyrion looked at him with confusion, as Joffrey did not see the need to tell him of the wedding at Riverrun, and grandfather did not deem it important to invite him. Then again, not even Joffrey's own mother had been invited. It will continue as planned, Varys answered. It seems most of the lords of the Seven Kingdoms are content to see how things unfold for the time being. Renly and Stannis, how soon can they arrive and with what strength? Joffrey questioned, a frown on his face. He wasn't expecting Balon to make a move so soon, it would force them into a desperate position. The debt was only rising, and while they found loans and income, most notably by selling Aegon's old crown to a Dothrakikal and one of the small council chambers Valyrian steel sphinx to Casterly Rock, they wouldn't be able to afford a drawn-out war. Stannis has wrote a letter from Dragonstone, he will be in the capital within a few days, Baelish responded. I'd expect no more than 3,000 men along with the Royal Navy. Renly will have more men, but more ambitions as well. I'd wager some 20,000 men who have never wielded more than a scythe before this. Your Grace, what are your orders? Petter asked calmly. Call the banners.